Hey there, AP Euro students. All right, the next thing we got to talk about is this term mercantilism. So it's an economic idea that fits into absolutism, exploration, kind of all these things. So super important term. We got to make sure you understand kind of what's going on and what the thought behind it is, and then how you achieve the goals that mercantilism is looking to achieve. I see I have a typo in my slide here. Doggone it, Vandenberg. Let's go with that. Okay, so if you're King Louis or Peter the Great, as we'll talk about in the next one, uh, you need to fund a lot of these things that you're doing, right? When you increase the size of government, obviously the funding has to increase as well. So, really, what allowed for King Louis and these other absolutists to kind of fund things like Versailles and war and all these other things they're doing? Uh, some of it is colonization, right? The discoveries in the Americas, introductions of new goods to Europe are going to lead to these really significant changes in the economy, right? So without some of that exploration stuff, mercantilism doesn't really work, as we'll find out. And so we start to see this develop in the 1500s. And again, if you think of just your chronological order stuff here, Columbus is late 1400s, right? And so this starts developing in the 1500s. And again, now with King Louis, we're into the 1600s. So, what the heck is mercantilism? Really, here's the premise, right? You have to understand that it's based on the best way to strengthen your country is to increase your wealth, right? And increase your access to gain wealth. And so I got 7 basic principles we got to go over to make sure we're all squared away here. But this is how, again, with the ultimate goal of gaining wealth, this is how you do it. Okay, so number 1, you measure wealth by gold and silver. And if you think about like Spain, when we talked about them, right, that's in this era and they're accumulating all that silver and there's negative things that happen because of it. But that makes sense with this premise, right, of mercantilism. Number 2, there's only a finite supply or a fixed amount of wealth in the world. And therefore, nations have to compete for it, right? And that's obviously going to cause some of this, some tension, as we'll see. And so, finite supply of wealth, gold and silver is how you measure wealth, right? We got to go out and get as much as we can and accumulate as much wealth as possible. Then, and we'll talk about this term specifically on the next slide, a favorable balance of trade, which basically boils down to you need to be exporting more than you're importing, right? You want to be on a favorable, positive side of trade. So that's what number 4 says, right? Countries should limit imports, maximize what you're producing. You should have your own source of raw materials. And where do you think that comes from? Yes, your colonies and your settlements in the New World. 6 is big. And if you think about like the American Revolution, this thought of colonies exist to benefit the mother country, which in our history would be England. They're not there to benefit those people. It's an English colony, an English settlement, right? And then because of that, those colonies, those settlements should only trade with the mother country. So the 13 colonies, you should only trade with England, right? Not these other places in Europe. You're there to benefit us, not yourself and not everyone else. Now, how do you achieve a favorable balance of trade? Okay. First of all, right, the goal is to sell more goods than a country buys from foreign countries, or you're exporting more than you're importing. So, how do you do that? Number 1, place tariffs or taxes on stuff coming in. It drives up the price of that, right? People won't want to buy as many imported goods. Encourage exports that sell for a high value, right, or a high price. Let's not make pens. This doesn't sell for much. Okay, let's make pickup trucks. That sells for a lot more. Government subsidies, which our government and other governments still do, right, where you're giving government money to help certain businesses. I mean, the U.S. did it with the railroads, right? If you think of your American history classes. We want to control overseas sources of raw materials. That's colonies. That way you don't need to spend any money to obtain those natural resources because they're coming from your colonies. And something we still hear about today, if we are self-sustaining, then we're not reliant on other places that maybe like us, maybe don't like us, or whatever. Okay, so there you go. Mercantilism, super important. Make sure you understand it.